thewellnesscouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Mara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Kim Morrison.
And I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And this week we have an incredibly special guest. I've had the privilege of speaking on stage with him. I think the topic is incredibly important. It is about a conversation around mental health and well-being. He is known as the Unbreakable Farmer, Mr. Warren Davies, but the first time I spoke with him, he actually stood on stage with a broken arm, so I thought that was quite interesting. But welcome to the show, gorgeous Warren. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks for inviting me on, and good to meet you too, Cindy.
Oh, well, look, we don't have the gorgeous Karen with us this week, but we will delve deep into certain conversations and questions that she would ask. But perhaps for our listeners and those that haven't heard of you, Warren, could you give us a brief background as to who you are and how did you get to coming up with the name The Unbreakable Farmer?
Well, it's been probably a life journey, I suppose, that got me to starting on this speaking career as the Unbreakable Farmer. But I suppose that the story started back when I was growing up. I was growing up in Melbourne, and Dad always harboured this dream of being a farmer. And yeah, we found ourselves when I was 15 moving out of the city to the country, and Dad had purchased his first farm, and that was the start of our life in the country and our life on it as dairy farmers. And you know, as a 15-year-old kid, I thought farming was all about motorbikes and tractors, and you know, thought it was all fantastic and all a bit of fun. And I was struggling at school and needed to find a career path. That career path had kind of due to my schooling and all that was, you know, I looked at farming and started a job as a farmhand when I was 16. And that evolved over the next 5 to 7 years of learning all the skills that I needed to know on that, working for this guy who happened to be one of the best farmers in the district around where I'm from, and learned a lot of skills. And by the time I was 22, and just on the verge of getting married, fairly naive and cocky, thought I knew everything I needed to know, and branched out on my own journey. But that journey, the opportunity had come. That journey started by the opportunity of a couple of 100 acres come up for sale next door to Mum and Dad's, and we pounced on that and joined the two farms together and created a family business and went into that business. And I know, Kim, that you've heard me speak and you've heard a bit of this story. You know, naively going into that business, I knew I was going into business with Mum and Dad. And that sometimes in a family business can be fraught with danger. Secondly, I knew I was going into business with the banks because they borrowed me the money, but probably didn't pay much attention to my silent business partner. And her name was Mother Nature, and she was the one that was probably going to throw the biggest curveballs at me over that journey. And that journey then, you know, through some of the things that happened, either from Mother Nature or a couple of other things that happened on the farm, triggered a thing that what I now share in my talks and you know what I do now is that it triggered my mental health journey as well. And that first started with a flood. Triggered a bit of a you know, a downward spiral, but didn't really pay much attention to it. Then we had a family bust up and on the farm, and family is my number one value, so it had a really big impact on my well-being and my mental health. And I was slowly spiralling out of control, and then along came Mother Nature again and threw us a drought. And that drought continued on after the past 12 months and then into, 2 years, and the stress that was caused by that triggered even further relapse with my mental health conditions, and then spiraled into depression. And I got into some really dark places, and I suppose then we actually, after I got to my darkest of darkest points, we actually lost the farm. We decided that we could not continue farming anymore. We were losing too much money, so we decided just to walk away. We couldn't sell the farm, and we walked away from that farm with basically nothing. And I also, symbolically, I suppose, as I walked out the front gate that day when we left our farm, I unclipped my identity and left it on the front gate, which that, coupled with struggling with mental health challenges as well, kind of, took a long time to recover from, and especially searching for my identity and my purpose in life again, because I always thought I was going to be a farmer. So searching for that purpose, trying to find who I am was a journey and a half, and I did number of things, and often falling back to farming because I was pretty good at that. Without pumping my own tyres up, I was pretty good at farming. But it also exposed me to other things. As being a manager, I was managing other people and not just myself, and I learnt lots of things, and all these little bits and pieces that I was doing along the way planted seeds to eventually evolve into what I'm doing now. And one of the things, probably one of the most important jobs that I had that really planted the seed, was I did real estate for 3 years, and being a farm specialist, sitting down at tables with people, around their kitchen table, talking about their journey and understanding that everyone's got a story, but also dealing with, at that stage, the 3 Ds. That was either death, divorce or drought, and trying to help people navigate their journey into selling their farm, but also realising at the same time that I kind of was more of a counsellor than a real estate agent, and that's kind of evolved into what I do now. And how the Unbreakable Farmer whole thing come about was I ended up in this search and this journey of trying to find my purpose and my identity. I did a speaker course, and in that speaker course, one of the exercises we had to do was, first workshop was to stand up and share our story unrehearsed, without any warning. The facilitator, just as we walked in the room, said, and by the way, before coffee break this morning, we'll be all sharing our story. So didn't really know why I was there in the first place. Most of the other participants in this course were all business owners wanting to learn the art of articulating their business a lot better than they were through speaking. Me, I was just there because, basically the facilitator said that I had a story, and he urged me to attend. After sharing my story at that workshop, a guy came up to me as we were going to the coffee break, and he said, "You're the Unbreakable Farmer." And I thought, it's a pretty catchy name. So instead of going and grabbing a cup of coffee, I went to GoDaddy and Googled the Unbreakable Farmer, and the domain name was free, so I registered it there and then. And basically that's the start of how the Unbreakable Farmer come about, and now leads into the work that I do now.
It's quite a remarkable story, and I'm sure, like you said, everybody has a story, and perhaps for us city folk, we have no appreciation and certainly very little understanding of what a farmer, whether it's dairy, sugar, cane, fruits and vegetables, grain, whatever it is, there is a lot of stories. Could you tell me, is it true that out of the 8 people that suicide each day in this country, 6 of those are men? Do you know the statistics of how many of those are farmers?
That's a stat that I can't find any research to quantify it, but I know it's a big percentage, especially in struggling times. I don't know the exact stat because every time you go to look for those figures, they're hard to find because they only do it by region and not by employment or job or whatever it is, whatever you want to, whatever group that they want to attribute that stat to. So, but I know just from personal experience, it's fairly high. And I also know that the stats don't really paint the true picture either. That's one thing that I have learnt over the last few years, that especially around mental health, mental illness, and particularly suicide, statistics don't really paint the true picture.
It's quite sad and tragic, and something that maybe we could delve into a little bit later. But there was a story you told on stage. I just want to go back to your own unravelling and your own ahas, if you like, as to where was the epiphany that you knew you were in trouble, that you needed help, or was that a process in itself? Because I remember one particular story of yours with the football game. Could you lead us into that and how you found where your breaking point was?
I think it was probably a build-up thing, and I think the underlying part of my story is that I didn't do anything about it. I didn't reach out and seek help. All the things that I tell people, and I don't tell people to do, that I urge them to do now, my lessons that I learned are all the things that I did badly. And one of those things was like communicating how I was feeling, because it's I always say, especially if I'm talking to a farming group, like I was tarred with the brush twice. I was a bloke and I was a farmer, so there was no way known that I was going to reach out, or I didn't think it was the right thing to do, to reach out and actually talk about your emotions and how you were feeling and how you were travelling. So it was a real build-up, a build-up of things, and with the ongoing drought, the added pressure, taking it back a step further than to the family breakup, because family was my number one value. It had a big effect on me. It took a bit of working through to get to resolve that situation, and one of those things were that we brought my parents out of the farm, took on a lot of debt, which was only a few years before the drought hit, so we were fairly financially highly geared, but had a really clear plan of what we wanted to do. And when the drought first hit and took hold, that plan was really robust, and we were moving forward, and we were moving forward and making progress in our business. It was when it hit the second year and commodities got dearer and things got tighter, including water, because we're in an irrigation area. A lot of things, a lot of pressure was added. And the story that you allude to, Kim, is that, one of my outlets was playing football, AFL footy, or, our local footy here. And, there was an incident on the footy field when I was coaching, where I was playing against some of my mates, some of my best mates, and one of my mates, said something to me, and all of a sudden everything that was going on around me, the drought, the way I was feeling, the whole thing just unravelled right at that point, and I snapped, and I chased him till I caught up with him, and then basically King hit him on the ground and knocked him out, and the ensuing scuffle and all that. But I knew that, that there was something, everything was just falling apart at that stage, because footy was my outlet. That was my, my way of expressing myself, but not in that way. And obviously that's the way I was feeling. That's the way I expressed myself that day, which I will, you shouldn't have regrets, but I will regret that day forever. And that, from that, I lost the confidence of my best mate at the same time, and we didn't speak for 3.5 years, which was really challenging when everything else was going on at the same time. So I knew then that I was in trouble. My well-being was really being challenged by everything that was happening around me, but I really wasn't taking enough action. I wasn't communicating with the people around me, and from that point then disconnected from everything that I really enjoyed doing, being involved in my community, being involved in my family, all those things I disconnected from, which, you couple that with everything else that was going on was, just a recipe for disaster, really, because I was isolating myself. And I say in my talks now, isolation's the biggest killer. It's okay to have your quiet time, understand that, some isolated time by yourself, but, when you're isolating yourself for the reason, of depression and, and feeling all the emotions that I was feeling and carrying the shame and the guilt that I was carrying because I felt I was letting everyone down, including myself. Isolation's not a good, not recommended to isolate yourself from everyone. You need to be talking, and that's what I did. And so, that's where I kind of realised that, everything was unravelling, but it was a downward spiral from that point, really.
Can you tell us, Warren, the time period of when you bought and purchased your property to when you walked away from it? How many years was that?
Just got to try and do the numbers, but I think we would have been 14 years, 15 years.
Oh, so it was quite some time. So you would have done a lot of work on that place. There would have been a lot of work for you to walk away from, which I think would have been a very hard thing to do.
It was a lifetime's work, really, or felt like a lifetime work at that stage. We basically, being non-generational farmers, it was, and particularly being young and raising a family, it was more than our farm. By the time we left our farm, we had 4 kids. Our 3 oldest kids, that's where they grew up. We built our home. It was more than our farm. It was our job, our business, our place where we lived, where our kids grew up, where our kids had their freedom. It was our everything. It was all consuming. Farming's all consuming, and especially your own farm. It's more than it's more than a business. But at the end of the day, the harsh reality of life is that it is only just a business. And
yeah, but it was more than just a business because like you said, it was your home. So can you just tell us what area in Australia you were in? And I had 2 questions, but let's start with the area that it was in.
Yeah, so it's in northern Victoria. So we're situated where our farm was situated in a town on the edge of a town called Tongala, which is about halfway between Shepparton and Echuca. Mm-hmm. So we're right in the middle of the Goulburn Valley in the irrigation area of the Goulburn Valley. So, it was then, not quite so much now, but a very rich dairy area of Victoria and one of the biggest or bigger dairy regions of Australia. So, yeah, it was we were right in the mix, the midst of, and where we lived, we're on a stretch of dirt that was pretty well renowned, through that area for really good dairy farms. And, so it was, we'd been there, as I said, we weren't generational farmers, but, families all around us were all, second, third or fourth generation farmers that were around us.
And dairy was the only thing that you farmed, or did you farm other things?
No, dairy was on Dad's first farm. He tried a few different things. He grew strawberries, and we were dairy farmers. I was focused on sticking to my lane, as they say, sticking to my highway, and so dairying was. We never diversified into anything else. We were more of an intensive, typical kind of Goulburn Valley farm where you've only got enough land to do what you were doing. You weren't doing anything else. I've managed farms since that, do lots of other stuff. You got dairy, and then you grow grain, and you've got fodder crops and all that sort of stuff. But basically, we were just predominantly dairy.
And who did you sell your milk to?
A number of different factories. At first, we we were supplying Nestle, they had a factory in Tongala, and then we were supplying dairy farmers, which was basically more fresh milk kind of supply, domestic fresh milk, where Nestle were more turning it into powder or condensed milk or any of those kind of products that Nestle make. So, but when we moved to dairy farmers, we were looking for a better paying contract, and that's what we did. Which that contract supplied more fresh milk to the Australian market, I suppose.
Yeah, and do you think you were paid well?
Look, it had its ups and downs. At one stage, we were getting paid terribly, and that's what that prompted the move from Nestle. I think the year that we moved from Nestle, I think we were getting paid 22 cents a litre for our milk that year, and I secured a contract with for dairy farmers for year-round supply and totally different marketplace for I think 45 cents a litre. Even still, even at those prices now, it's still below the cost of production. So,
and do you process the milk as far as the pasteurisation, or it went raw to dairy farmers and Nestle?
Yeah, just raw. So not pasteurised on farm. It was just straight into your vat, and then got picked up once a day by the milk tanker and taken to the factory, and then they pasteurise it and do whatever they get whatever product they're making out of that milk,
and then sell it for a fortune.
Yep, it's a funny. The milk market is a funny game, but they value add and off they go. A few businesses that I've managed for, one of the things that a lot of corporate farms are doing now is trying to vertically integrate their businesses. Now that they're in control everything from growing the fodder to the sale of the product. Which is, you've got a lot more control. But as a dairy farmer, just as a normal everyday dairy farmer, you're a price taker, you're a price maker.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm from Bendigo, and I'm a 1960s child. So I remember the day when the milk was delivered in glass jars to our front door with the cream on the top from the farmer. Yeah. Yeah.
That still happens in certain, there's some, and they're more than boutique farmers now, but there's some farmers now that have started up their own brands, and they're, Gippsland Jersey's one that comes to mind. Kai Valley Dairies here close to home is another one where they do their own, they process their own milk, and now have got other suppliers on, other farmers to supply them as well on board to, produce, niche, I suppose, niche brands compared to the everyday standard milk. So you can still buy those without being in bottles. Some of them still do bottles, but with the cream on top like you used to be able to in the good old days.
Yeah. Well, up here we've got Mullaney Dairies, and they use other dairies and they collect their or from other farmers, they collect the milk, and that's distributed around our local area. We've got Kalula. So I feel like everything that you've been speaking about, it's almost like dairy farmers and Nestle screwed you down so far, like 22 cents a litre and 45 cents a litre. Thank goodness you doubled your money.
Yeah.
But were they part of the issue with the falling? Like, you had the banks on your back, no doubt. You're getting very little money for the milk that you're producing. Were they all part of the downfall of what happened with you, the drought? I loved how you said my silent business partner was Mother Nature.
Yeah. I didn't pay her enough respect at the start. Didn't understand. I did understand, but probably didn't pay it that enough respect. I thought I was above her. Well, not above her, but I could control. And that's one of the biggest lessons, that I've learned out of my whole journey is you can only control what you can control, and don't try and do otherwise, because it can lead to your downfall.
Yeah, and you can't control the rain that falls, we can't control, the sun that shines, because we know that sun's going to come up, but we just don't know about those rains. So,
but to answer your question directly, there was lots of issues. Obviously, there was the financial pressure, but we had a plan, and we'd sat with advisors and we'd worked out the plan, even at those milk prices, how we could make money. And look, the drought, the first little bit of the drought really taught us some good lessons, and we were going along all right. It was just then, as the drought went on, things got tighter, feed prices went through the roof, etc. Water got tighter, and we were in an irrigation area, so we relied on that irrigation. So when you didn't have, you could only water for a certain part of the year, it made it difficult to grow the grass that you needed. So then you relied on outside feed sources, which then, as the drought went on, those feed sources got dearer and dearer. So that were one of the things. But look, everyone was in the same boat, and that's why I say everyone's story is unique. It was the way that I handled it, or my underlying mental health challenges that I had, were triggered by these stresses, and that's led to my downfall.
Yeah.
When you're talking about mental health issues, I'd just love you to explain, how did you know it was a mental health issue as opposed to just, and no disrespect, but an emotion? I mean, where's the line from being emotional or down or concerned or worried into it becoming what we bracket as a mental health issue? Can you explain where you got to with that?
Well, over the years leading up to that, I'd been struggling. Around the family breakup, I was struggling. I did actually go and seek help. Didn't take it seriously enough, but it was when you go to the doctor and you talk about things. I was diagnosed then that I had depression. And I was. And I've always been anxious, and you've heard me share my story, Kim, that, part of these workshops at this speaker course, one of the next workshops was about unpacking our story and trying to find the value of it. In that process, I actually realised that, and I didn't acknowledge it at the time and didn't understand what it was, but now looking back, when I was young, I was struggling with anxiety and self-esteem issues way back as far as, and I'm blessed or cursed, whichever way you want to look at it, with a really good memory. And I can remember, around 7 years old where, I was struggling with that stuff, but didn't understand it, obviously, as a kid, and didn't acknowledge it. And once again, never reached out and sought help about it. And I think those things just compounded over the time. But I think one of the things that you could, and I know this now, travelling around Australia, speaking in communities like where I was recently in Texas, in Queensland, and you just know that, you start off with and you're just feeling down, and you're challenged by your financial situation and by the weather and all that, but prolonged exposure to enormous amounts of stress can lead to other things, and that's where I think I got to. So probably when I first went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with depression, I probably didn't believe it, and probably thought, maybe it's just I'm feeling down and I've got to work my way out of it. But the thing is that it just kept spiraling out of control, and when you get to a situation where you're suicidal, it's kind of got out of hand, and that's kind of where I got to.
Tell me what the doctor, when you went to the doctor, what was his prescription to heal this, or what was his way? What was the way it was handled in order for you to come out of that depression?
Yeah, so the first time I went to the doctor, and you answer the questions that they ask you so they can assess where you're at. I was put on a mental health plan, which if you go to the GP now and you go, that's what they'll put you on. I was given some antidepressants, and in that part of that mental health plan is then you go and see a psychologist. You can talk through your problems with them, or your issues with them, and see how they can help you. One thing with me, because I was still hell bent on being that really good farmer, and because I didn't have which was really hard, as you said, Kim, a few months back, when I didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg, I could still do what I was doing. I didn't really pay enough respect to that diagnosis, and just I didn't search for anything outside of that. So the bottom line is those antidepressants sat on the fridge, and I didn't take them because I was too caught up in doing what I was doing. And one day led to a week, it led to a month, led to 6 months down the track, and I was still sitting there. When I did end up going back to the doctors and got prescribed antidepressants again, the first dose didn't work, so then you get a different dose to see if that works, etc., etc. I found after taking them for a fair while that they were making me feel worse than they were better, and that led me on to my journey that I'm kind of on now, which is a ever-evolving journey of, trying to find what works for me, and look, and please, I'm not a professional, and I'm not saying this is everyone's course of action, but antidepressants weren't for me. I didn't believe they were, and I went searching for other ways to, to combat what I was going through.
Warren, I'm just curious too. I mean, we're very grateful to you sharing this story, and I don't want to pigeonhole men and there seems to be a bit of a movement at the moment for men to be opening up a bit more. I'm curious as to how your wife was dealing with all of this and raising the 4 children. And did you guys have deep and meaningful conversations at night? Did you, when the kids were asleep, did you confront things together, or was it soldier on, chin up, we've got this? How did she cope with it? And also, how did you do that together, if at all?
Yeah, and that's one of my biggest downfalls, is that we didn't do it together. We were together, but we were both facing the same challenges. And one of my things now is I realised, one of the reasons I found it hard to reach out to her and talk about how I was feeling is because I didn't want to burden her any more than she already was, because she was travelling the same journey, and it had a big effect on us. Not in a relationship, or change our relationship. It had to, but it had a big effect on us because it was basically fight or sink kind of mentality. Is that you just had to keep fighting to try and save what your business, or that was sink. And we were both fighting to try and save our business, but the financial stress that come along with the drought, and that we don't, as dairy farmers, you get paid once a month on the 15th, and I think we still both tremble on the 15th, knowing that your milk check was coming in, and there was a pile of bills bigger than the milk check was ever going to pay. But we had conversations, but they weren't probably deep enough. We needed to be able to support each other. We were kind of both floating aimlessly. And I know, and also speaking to lots of families, and I've been fortunate enough to be put in the nerve-wracking position of doing a couple of just all-women presentations where my only audience is women. And I know that what I'm telling you here is not unique. This is how it happens. Like I don't feel bad that, in hindsight, don't feel bad that, I should have spoke, because this is what's happening, because everyone's under so much pressure. You just try and do what you can do. You're in this survival mode situation that you're just trying to scramble your way, trying to seek, scramble for air kind of thing. And that's what it felt like on days, like you were just scrambling to keep your head above water so you could take a breath of air. that's where it gets to. And so you're both just trying to fight, keep yourself on track. And for me, being the male in that whole situation is then, the added layer of, I'm the breadwinner, or I'm the, that masculine kind of thought process of, I'm not the king of the house. I've never thought of myself as that, but you're the person that's in charge here, and you can't let your family down, and that adds another layer as well. Well, that to me added an extra layer of pressure that was also adding to everything else that I was going through. So to actually reach out to her, and look, and I know now, we've had conversations since that, she was struggling just as much as me, probably handling it a bit differently to what I was, but, I think because I didn't reach out and talk enough, mine spiraled a little bit more into, and obviously being predisposed to probably more of the go down the depression kind of anxiety, low self-esteem kind of issues that was having a big effect on me, that she was probably better equipped to handle than what I was.
Sorry, Cindy.
Oh, sorry, Kimmy. I was just wondering about, do you think our resilience, and I'm not just talking about you, I'm talking about Australia as a whole, that there's so much suicide, there's so much mental illness. Do you think we've lost our resilience to cope, or do you think that life's just getting harder and harder?
Yeah.
What do you believe is happening?
So the way I look at, paint the picture of resilience, my resilience and my mental health are so intertwined. I can't separate them really. So the way I look at resilience is, and the paint the picture is resilience. The most thing that I can relate resilience to would be like bungee jumping. So, when I've never bungee jumped, not that courageous, but if you ever jump off a thing, off a platform, what helps you bounce back is your bungee cord, and that's what the bungee cord represents, my mental health. If I don't look after it and I don't maintain it, eventually that bungee cord's going to fail. And that's the way I paint the picture around resilience. So unless I don't think we're doing enough to maintain our resilience. There's all different theories. And yes, and I believe that you've got to be exposed to challenging stuff to build resilience. It's a muscle, like they say, it's a muscle. So you've got to be exposed to it. But yeah, if you're not maintaining that muscle, like with all the other stuff that you need to be doing to maintain your mental health, that eventually that bungee cord's going to end up snapping.
I heard a quote recently about what's happening with children and them not having the resilience. And the first one we used to talk about was helicopter parents. But now I think it's called a snow clearing parent.
Yeah.
And the snow clearing parent is a parent that clears everything out of the way so that there's nothing that can hurt the child.
Yeah.
And I sometimes, I remember, like I said, I'm a 60s child, and I lived in Bendigo, and Mum would just say, make sure you're home before dark. And we'd go out on our push bikes, and we had motorbikes that we were on the creek in, and or we'd go walking to the park. I don't know, but it's almost like our kids don't get this opportunity to do that, especially if they live in the city, and a majority of us live in the city. And so, I love that you said that your resilience is, with your mental health. So I'm like going, well, resilience would be tackling all these things that are coming along and figuring out how to do them and being able to do them. And mental health on another term is, just that, a little bit different. So
But that's what I suppose the painting that picture of the bungee jumping. You know, my mental health was there. I was bouncing back, but because I was so consumed in saving my business, my person, myself, was the last job on the list. So I didn't do enough of the stuff for me to be able to maintain that part of the bungee cord. You know, that part of the bungee cord wasn't getting looked after because I was so consumed in trying to, basically breathe and save the business and make sure my family was being cared for and all that sort of stuff.
So can you now tell us, what does the Unbreakable Farmer do now?
Well, just before we go there,
sorry, Kim.
I'd just love to know, what was your break point? What was your rock bottom? Like what shoveled you out of this to where Cindy's now asked, what is the Unbreakable? There must have been a turning point for you.
That was the couldn't see my way out point, the dark point, I can't go on point. That was, and you've heard that in my talks. I call that moment in time my 2 feet of perspective. That 2 feet of perspective moment in my life was my turning point. And it wasn't a click of the finger turning point. It's taken a long time to bounce back, or to repair that bungee cord so I can bounce back. But that was the low point. That moment in time where life had given me 2 choices. It was, either be bitter and twisted and blame everything on everyone else, or the weather or whatever it was, or I could choose to become better. And I owed it to myself, because that in that moment in time, holy hell, how did you get here? How did you get to this point? It was a lot of soul searching in a short amount of time to work out. I didn't really want to be here where I am right now.
There's a hell of a lot of guts within you then, to have had that little bit of clarity in that moment of choosing between life and death, I guess is how to put it so bluntly. There's a lot of people that can't make that choice. And having been affected by suicide in our family, I'm very careful with the words, because so many people seem to be affected by this.
Yeah.
And there is I don't think anyone could ever fully appreciate or understand where someone is at to even contemplate it, let alone follow it through. And I don't think any one of us could judge that. Is that fair to say?
It's a numb place. That's about the best way to describe it, a place of confusion. They're probably the best 2 words to describe confusion and numb. And just losing your complete way of trying to rationalise your way out of something. And that's where I got to, and just being that isolated, and even though that you're surrounded by people, you're still alone. And that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, is trying to make sure that people are talking and making sure that they're expressing how they're feeling and seeking that help that they need, because the alternative's not real flash.
Especially for those that are around you.
Yeah.
Hey guys, we hope you're enjoying this conversation as much as we are. There is so much more to be had. So this is just part 1 of this extraordinary interview with Warren Davies, the Unbreakable Farmer. Make sure you post your comments for this week into our Facebook group.com/up-for-a-chat, or you can go to thewellnesscouch.com/up-for-a-chat. And remember to stay tuned for next week, where you'll hear the second part of the Unbreakable Farmer's story, where we start to delve into more tools and techniques and how he's used his story to help change and impact the world. We look forward to talking to you then. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next week.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.